They didn't send a message first. No warning, no broadcasted demand or a flashy display of power. The Empire came in silence. Just cold, calculated intrusion. It started with the satellites, one by one blinking out, as if space itself was swallowing them. Then the power grids began crashing in major cities, not all at once, but in waves, like they were testing how fast we'd notice, how fast we'd react. We didn't. Not fast enough. I was stationed in Alaska, Joint Defense Command. We weren't even the first to see the ships. Civilians caught it on their phones before the military had a single feed. Triangular hulls the size of skyscrapers blotting out the sun over the Pacific. They hovered for 3 hours, unmoving, unresponsive. Then at 1300 hours UTC they struck Los Angeles, Shanghai, Johannesburg, London. Gone. No craters, no aftermath, just vaporized, like someone took a digital eraser and wiped out entire cities. Billions turned into silence. We couldn't even launch a single counterstrike. The satellites were dead, GPS was fried, and command lines jammed. They didn't speak our language, but they made their message clear. Submit or vanish. Most people cracked. Presidents, generals, diplomats. They scattered like roaches under floodlights. But not all of us. Not me. Not Colonel Madsen. Not the grim bastards left in the cold zone. We'd spent decades preparing for Earth's own wars, and now it seemed like all that hatred, all that brutality we'd stored up for each other, was finally going to be put to better use. I still remember the colonel standing in front of the bunker door, frost clinging to his beard like ash. "If they want Earth, they're going to have to choke on it," he said. Then he turned to me. "You've read The Art of War?" "Twice," I lied. "Good," he growled. "Then you know what you have to do." We didn't have space fleets, no elegant laser weapons or shields. What we had was grit, rage, and a history of never staying down. We were still burning coal and dropping bombs from B-2s, but we knew how to bleed, how to hate. The Empire, whatever hive-minded, sterile force it was, had just woken up a species built on revenge. They assumed we'd scatter. Instead, we rallied. In basements, bunkers, forest hideouts, and rusted military bases, men started putting their old uniforms back on. Engineers rewired fallen drones. Mechanics turned mining bots into suicide machines. Coders, the freaks of the dark web, built viruses that slipped into alien systems like snakes through grass. And me? I got my hands on something they didn't expect. One of their drones, shot down in Montana by a farmer with a high-powered rail slug he built himself. Bastard even used his tractor to drag the wreckage back to his barn. The thing was still humming, still trying to self-repair when I got there. Smooth chrome plating, purple wiring, no visible cockpit. I stared at it for a long time. It looked soulless, like a weapon made by a race that didn't believe in pain. I hated it immediately. "We're going to dissect this," I told the farmer. He spit in the snow. "Good. Maybe you'll find whatever pride they lost in building it." I brought the core to Madsen. He called in the last hacker we could trust, a kid from the streets of Caracas who used to crack bank vaults for sport. He was young, twitchy, probably on something, but brilliant. He jacked into the thing like it was a video game, and within hours he was speaking their language. Not words, code, commands, directives. What we found chilled us. They weren't here to negotiate. This wasn't occupation. It was extermination. A slow purge. Turn off the lights, shut down the tech, isolate the people, then remove them quietly. They'd done it before, on other planets. Dozens of them. No survivors. But they'd made a mistake, a fatal one. They thought humans would break. They'd never seen what happens when Earth bleeds. We didn't start with missiles. We started with poison. By the time our tech teams finished gutting the alien drone, we'd learned something important. Whatever materials they were using in their circuits weren't native to Earth. They were fragile here, reactive to certain Earth-borne elements, especially radiation. High doses of gamma exposure shorted them out, not just physically, but mentally. Their drones, their scouts, even some of their lower-ranking officers seemed connected to a shared neural net, a hive mind, but more complex. The moment one node got corrupted, it spread. It was a weakness, a biological backdoor, and we were going to kick it wide open. The first counterstrike happened in silence. Not on TV, not in the sky. It happened in a sewer outside Berlin, where one of their drones had set up a subterranean relay station beneath the ruins of a water treatment plant. 3 men went in. Only one came back. But when he did, the relay tower above exploded without warning, imploding inward like it had had a stroke. Our guy, some ex-Russian infantryman named Anton, came back coughing up blood and radiation burns across his face. But he was smiling. He knew he'd killed something big. The next week, 5 more drones fell across Europe. Not from bullets, from collapse, neurological failure, system-wide error. It spread fast. By the end of the month, the Empire's precision was slipping. They started missing targets. Their kill squads walked into traps. One of their cruisers over South America dropped from the sky after a frequency hack made its guidance system think it was flying through a mountain range. The best part? They didn't know how. They didn't understand guerrilla warfare. They didn't get why we didn't fight clean, why we used children as runners and rigged entire villages as bait. They didn't get why we faked our own deaths, sabotaged food supplies, and turned enemy weapons into booby-trapped trophies. They didn't get Earth. They didn't get us. Colonel Madsen said it best in one of our last briefings. These bastards thought they were invading a planet, but what they really did was piss off a species that spent most of its existence inventing new ways to kill each other. And yeah, maybe it wasn't noble, maybe it wasn't heroic, but it was effective. I remember the first time we captured one alive. It didn't beg, it didn't scream, it just watched. Big, black, glassy eyes with no emotion in them. It was tall, 8 feet maybe, with skin like ceramic and movements that looked like they were on a delay. It didn't breathe, didn't blink. We had it shackled in a lead-lined cell in what used to be an underground sports stadium. Every time we tried to communicate, it stayed silent. But when we brought in a young boy, just 10, dirty, malnourished, carrying a small EMP device, it twitched, not out of fear, out of recognition. It knew we were using civilians now. It knew the rules had changed. The boy activated the pulse, and the creature collapsed in a heap, convulsing. Then something inside its mouth clicked, and it self-terminated, acid melting half the body before we could intervene. Cowards. They were gods above the stars, sure. But here, on Earth, they bled. And when something bleeds, we can kill it. So we kept pushing. We built mobile labs underground, far from major cities, where our scientists worked day and night reverse engineering their tech. We figured out how to mimic their comms. We even started broadcasting false distress calls to draw their ships into ambushes. Africa became a graveyard for alien patrols. South America, a breeding ground for resistance cells. Even the damn Australians, outnumbered and cut off, turned their deserts into minefields and started picking off cruisers like it was a national sport. But the best part? They couldn't adapt. They weren't built for resistance. They weren't prepared for a war of attrition against a species that doesn't know when to quit. They'd come expecting submission. What they got was vengeance. Still, victory was far off. For every win we clawed out of dirt, we lost entire towns. Their orbital weapons still worked. One swipe and another city was gone, and we couldn't get up there, not yet. But something was shifting. For the first time, their cruisers started pulling back. Their scouts stopped landing. Their transmissions became frantic, fragmented, paranoid. We had infected their confidence. Earth was no longer a prize. It was becoming a graveyard, and we were just getting started. We didn't have spaceships, but we had ambition. And rage, that bottomless kind that comes from watching your cities vanish, your children turn to ash, and your leaders hide underground while the rest of us clawed survival out of rubble. That's what drove the mission. They called it Black Climb. The intel came from intercepted alien chatter, a ground-to-orbit transport hub somewhere in Central Asia. Not a ship, not a weapon, a tower. A long, dark needle stretching miles into the sky, anchored to a massive base sunk into what used to be the Kazakh steppe. They'd built it fast, hidden from satellite view until the skies were already blind. But now that we knew it existed, Madsen wanted it gone. He said, "If we can take that tower, we take their throat. Maybe even choke their fleet with it. Simple plan, impossible task. But Earth wasn't breeding dreamers anymore. We were building martyrs. I got tapped for lead, likely because I was reckless, expendable, and pissed off enough to do something stupid. They gave us a team of 12, a mix of ex-military defectors and people who just had nothing left to lose. No heroes, just killers with nothing better to do. The tower was protected by what they called silent guardians, hovering constructs that scanned for movement and reacted to energy signatures. Not heat, not motion, energy. That meant no radios, no drones, no advanced targeting systems, just boots, blades, and bullets. We started the climb at night. No light, no signal, just black sky and the howling wind across dead soil. Getting to the base was easy, too easy. The outer perimeter had already been hit by sandstorms, buried half of their ground defense systems. We slipped past the sentries using thermal suits soaked in mud and ash. One of our guys, an old French sapper named Dax, managed to tap into their outer hull and fry their power grid for exactly 40 seconds. That was all we needed. We hit the doors with explosive gel and swarmed in. No screaming, no shouting, just clean, fast killing. They didn't expect close quarters. They never did. Their soldiers were tall, sleek, precise, but slow in tight spaces. We brought knives, hatchets, shotguns with modified shells. It was chaos. We cleared 3 floors before they activated gravity lockdown. Suddenly the walls twisted, and we were yanked sideways. One of our guys, Mason, slammed into a steel bulkhead so hard his spine snapped. He didn't even get to scream, just dropped like a puppet cut from the strings. We adapted. We started moving like rats, using duct shafts, collapsing beams, even body weight to navigate the vertical maze. What was meant to stop us only made us angrier. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were spite in human skin. The higher we climbed, the weirder the structure got. Not just alien tech, alien biology. The walls pulsed with heat. Some sections had skin. One corridor even reacted when we bled on it, shifting shape, shrinking. It wasn't just a tower, it was alive. And it hated us. We reached the halfway mark after 6 hours, 7 left alive. The air was getting thinner, pressure different. One of the guys started hallucinating. Said he saw his dead wife in the wall. She was smiling. We left him behind. Not out of cruelty, just reality. There was no time for breakdowns. Not here. Not now. When we finally reached the core chamber, we saw what the Empire was really doing. They weren't just transporting troops, they were growing them. Thousands of suspended pods lined the walls, glowing with that same sick blue light. Inside each one was a half-formed soldier, not born, but printed, cloned, manufactured. No soul, just flesh and programming. It hit us like a hammer. They didn't conquer to expand, they conquered to harvest. Earth wasn't just a battleground, it was a factory, and we were the raw materials. Dax didn't wait. He planted explosives before I could even say anything. Big ones, enough to bring the whole damn spine of the tower down on itself. "Make it count," he said. Then he smiled, flipped me the detonator, and ran straight into the next room where more guards were pouring in. I never saw him die. I just saw the light. We rappelled out the side of the tower minutes before it blew. Fire roared up the structure like it was alive and screaming. I still remember watching the whole thing buckle, twist, and collapse in on itself, like a god being dragged down by its own sins. The explosion was visible from space, and for the first time since this war started, the Empire hesitated. But we knew better. We'd poked the hornet's nest, and now they were going to hit back harder than ever. They called it the Reaping. 3 days after we brought down the orbital tower, the sky bled. It started with a hum, low, steady, almost melodic, like something ancient waking up. Birds fell from the sky in flocks. The oceans turned still. The clouds turned red, then black. Then came the lights, hundreds of them, streaking down from the stars like falling stars dipped in oil. Orbital bombardment. But this time, they weren't targeting military sites. They weren't after bunkers, labs, or known resistance outposts. No, this time they struck where it would hurt most. Hospitals, farms, power plants, water reserves. They didn't want us dead. They wanted us to suffer first. And it worked. In the first 24 hours, we lost 80% of what was left of North America's food supply. 3 of the 5 remaining freshwater processing centers were obliterated, and in one of the most cold-blooded acts I've ever seen, they turned their fleet toward a refugee caravan, thousands of people fleeing south, and vaporized it. Men, women, children. Madsen watched it unfold on one of our salvaged monitors, jaw tight, fists clenched. "They're trying to starve us," he muttered. "Break the spine." But that wasn't all. The real attack came next. They dropped something new, not soldiers, not drones, something worse. They looked human at first. Roughly our shape, skin like glassy stone, no eyes, and moving like they were gliding over reality itself. Silent, efficient. They didn't march or shout. They just appeared, in streets, in forests, in caves. Wherever resistance lived, they hunted. We called them shadows. They didn't use weapons. They didn't need to. They touched you, and your nervous system shut down. Not death, something worse. Paralysis, a living freeze. People left to rot, unable to move, breathe, scream. We found entire platoons like that. Still breathing, eyes wide open, frozen in their own skin, and they moved in pairs. Always pairs, like hunters. I saw one up close. Too close. We were stationed near the ruins of Ankara, trying to reroute a supply caravan when one of them slipped into our rear perimeter. No noise, no warning. Just one of our scouts collapsing with a gurgling sound and a mark burned into the side of his face like a handprint made of frostbite. I shot it. Point blank. 3 rounds to the chest. It didn't flinch. It just turned to me, slow, curious, like a child watching ants under glass. I thought I was dead. I should have been dead. But then something strange happened. My comm crackled, just static at first. Then a voice, female, human, speaking a dialect I didn't recognize. Then the shadow twitched, just for a second, like it heard the voice too. It hesitated. I didn't wait. I grabbed a thermal grenade and threw it at its feet. Heat surged, the walls buckled, and it vanished in a flash of black smoke. Gone. I don't know what saved me that day. Maybe the voice, maybe the fear, maybe just luck. But I knew something then. The shadows weren't perfect. They had a weakness somewhere. We just hadn't found it yet. Still, the damage was done. Our numbers thinned. Entire regions went dark. Communications dropped. For every tower we brought down, they erased 3 cities. And morale? It hit the floor. I found Madsen alone in the war room that night. He wasn't barking orders. He wasn't pacing like usual, just sitting, staring at the old world map we kept on the wall, most of it already smeared with red markers. I asked him, "What now?" He didn't look at me, just whispered, "We bleed them more, even if it kills us." I nodded. That was the only answer that made sense anymore. So we regrouped, moved underground, deeper, started using caves, ruins, even old subway tunnels as new strongholds. We shifted tactics, ambush, sabotage, misinformation. We broadcast fake transmissions to lure them away, used decoys, human bait, anything to buy us time because we had something in the works, a new plan. One last strike, not just to hurt them, but to cripple them. A place, a ship, a name that kept showing up in their code. The Crucible. Whatever it wasn't just a command center. It was a heart, and we were going to stab it. We didn't know what the Crucible was, not really, only whispers in their intercepted data, scrambled pings and encrypted pulse patterns that even our best coders could barely untangle. But it showed up too often, too centralized, always behind their largest assaults, always near the command sequences for their shadows, always pulsing. We knew one thing. Whatever it wasn't just a ship. It was a nerve center, a command nexus, possibly even their queen if you wanted to get poetic about it. And if we could reach it, if we could rip it apart from the inside, maybe we could decapitate the whole empire, just long enough to breathe. Getting there was a suicide mission. So, naturally, I volunteered. The Crucible wasn't in orbit. It wasn't on Earth either. It was tethered, hidden in the thermosphere, cloaked above the equator. No visible structure, just a gravitational signature, too small for normal scans. They'd built it with the express purpose of being undetectable to any tech that hadn't been grown in a lab or stolen from another world. But we had one thing they didn't. A traitor. He didn't have a name. Not in words, just a series of vibrating pulses we couldn't replicate. But he bled like us, looked like them, said he'd deserted the Empire after witnessing something inside the Crucible, something that shouldn't exist. He never described it. Just shook his head, voice cracking like glass, and whispered, "Kill it before it becomes us." We didn't trust him. Hell, Madsen wanted to shoot him on sight, but the intel he gave us was solid. He drew maps, detailed, precise. Showed us where to board, where the shield generators were, where their internal AI couldn't track organic signals. He even offered to go with us. I said no. He wasn't invited. We built our own ship from scraps. Reverse-engineered alien thrusters welded to a rusted military drop pod. It wasn't pretty, wasn't even stable, but it could punch through the upper atmosphere with a half chance of not disintegrating on the way up. We called it the Bastard, because that's exactly what it was. The launch was silent. No fanfare, no countdown. Just a tight crew of 5 killers, all loaded with enough explosives to level a city block, strapped inside a pressurized coffin heading into the unknown. I'll never forget the feeling of weightlessness, not the way astronauts describe it. This wasn't floating. This was falling without permission into a sky we didn't belong in. Then suddenly we were there. The Crucible wasn't a ship. It was a machine, miles wide, shaped like a massive ring, spinning slowly around a glowing orb at its center. The surface pulsed with veins, liquid light flowing across it like blood in arteries. No doors, no lights, just quiet, oppressive quiet. We attached manually, docking clamps fired like harpoons. As we breached the hull, the metal moved, reacted, shifted to accommodate us, like it recognized us, like it was curious. Inside was worse. It wasn't just technology, it was tissue, walls that breathed, floors that flexed, lights that reacted to our heartbeats. This place was alive, and it didn't like us here. We moved fast. Madsen took point. I carried the core disruptor. Burke watched our 6. The other 2, Dale and Vargas, handled the charges. Our goal was simple. Reach the central node, drop the payload, and pray the shuttle didn't fall apart before we made it back. But the further we went in, the more it messed with our minds. Voices, familiar voices, the sound of loved ones, my brother, my dead father, my ex-wife, whispering apologies I never heard when she was alive. Madsen said he heard his son. Burke started screaming halfway through the descent corridor, said he saw his old squad, dead men walking the halls, smiling with empty eyes. He ran. We didn't go after him. We couldn't. When we reached the node, it wasn't what we expected. It wasn't a machine. It was a person. Or it used to be. Human. Stripped down to the core. Wires fed into his spine. Eyes peeled open by metal arms. Organs suspended in liquid gel. His lips were moving, fast, trembling, as if reciting something over and over. He was the pulse, the rhythm. He was the crucible. Vargas gagged. They're using him. He's a processor. Number, he wasn't just processing. He was directing, controlling the shadows, the drones, the attacks. Not because he wanted to. Because they'd stitched his soul into the machine, burned his will into the code. I stepped forward. He looked at me. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He whispered, "End it. Please." Madsen didn't blink. "Do it." I dropped the core bomb beside him, armed it. He smiled, and then the crucible screamed. The whole ship groaned like a living thing dying in slow agony. The walls convulsed. The floor cracked. Sirens, if you could call them that, howled through every corridor. We ran. Only 3 of us made it back to the bastard. Madsen stayed behind to hold the door. Never saw him go. Never heard him die. Just gone. As we undocked, fire erupted behind us. The crucible buckled, cracked, and exploded outward, like something that had been choking for centuries, finally gasping its last breath. From space, we saw it fall. A burning god, dying. But we didn't cheer, because that was just one head of the Hydra, and we knew, somewhere above the stars, the Empire had others. We expected rage. We expected immediate retaliation, orbital annihilation, fire raining from the stars, a final cleansing of the virus they called humanity. But that's not what happened. The crucible fell, and then nothing. No fleets appeared, no shadows descended, no signal, just static. For the first time since the war began, the Empire went quiet, and that terrified us more than their weapons ever did. The bastard crash-landed in the Atlantic, barely holding together. Vargas died on impact. Dale drowned in the wreckage, still strapped to his seat. I washed ashore near the remains of an old oil rig being used by a resistance outpost. Broken ribs, half-deaf, covered in shrapnel, but alive. The first thing I asked when I could speak again was, "Did it work?" They just nodded. People started calling it the Silence. The Crucible's destruction didn't just kill a command node, it shattered something deeper, something fundamental. Empire drones stopped mid-air. Shadows vanished into thin mist. Ships left in orbit hovered like confused insects, then slowly began turning on each other. They started eating themselves. We learned later that the Crucible didn't just process orders, it distributed cohesion. It was the will of the Empire in machine form, and when we burned it, we infected their chain of command with chaos. Their war machine, designed to operate in perfect harmony, fractured like glass under stress. Factions emerged. You wouldn't think a race built on hive control could splinter, but without the Crucible's mind binding them, the rot surfaced. Some of their commanders wanted to finish Earth off, purge the infestation, erase the insult. Others wanted to flee, abandon the planet as corrupted. And some began to question. That's when we found the wrecked carrier in the Sahara. It had crash-landed during the silence, burned out from the inside. No signs of attack, just torn wiring, melted systems, and one surviving officer. He didn't fight, didn't scream. He surrendered. He called himself Nakai or something close. His voice was distorted, but the fear in it wasn't. He said the fall of the Crucible didn't just damage their unity, it exposed them to something far worse. Individual thought. He said some of them were going mad. Hearing things, seeing things, remembering things they weren't supposed to remember, and some were starting to feel. I didn't believe him at first. Thought it was a trick. But then he said something I couldn't ignore. We didn't build the Crucible. We harvested it, from your kind. That changed everything. The horror set in slowly. It wasn't just some prisoner strapped into a machine. The entire Crucible, its code, its mind, had been designed from human consciousness. Stolen memories, broken spirits, our pain, weaponized into control systems. That was the real reason they wanted Earth. Not just for conquest, for fuel. And when we destroyed it, we didn't just damage their system. We triggered a psychic backlash, a spiritual fracture. Our suffering had been holding them together. Our rage was the glue. Now it was loose and spreading. Resistance movements all over the globe reported strange sightings, Empire units turning on each other, some self-destructing mid-mission, a few even defecting, not to help us, but because they didn't know who they were anymore. They were cracking. And we saw the opportunity. Madsen's old lieutenants, those who still lived, came together in what was left of Antarctica, our new headquarters, cold enough to jam their scans, isolated enough to regroup. We formed a plan to exploit the chaos, hit the weakened nodes, turn factions against each other, weaponize their confusion, and maybe, just maybe, push this war into the stars. Because we'd found something else, coordinates, deep within the broken remnants of the Crucible's data core, salvaged by the last of our hackers, was a location. Not in Earth's system. Far beyond. A homeworld. Their homeworld. Undocumented, buried. Nakai called it Yura. He said no one returns from there. And that's where we were going next. Because if this thing wasn't just about Earth, if it was about something bigger, older, then we had to end it at the root. Not with peace, but with extinction. The first human-made deep space ship wasn't a marvel. It wasn't graceful. It didn't shine with chrome or hum with futuristic tech. It was a coffin wrapped in defiance. We called it Vengeance. Built from the gutted remains of an Empire scout cruiser, patched with Earth tech, and powered by a hybrid core made from a melted Crucible shard and a salvaged nuclear plant. Vengeance wasn't supposed to fly. But it did. And we flew it straight into hell. The mission was simple on paper. Reach Ur, find the Empire's source, and destroy it before they could rebuild. In reality, it was suicide. We were running blind into the heart of a species that built gods out of pain. We didn't expect to survive. No one did. The crew was hand-picked, the worst of us, not the clean-cut heroes, not the war room strategists or the diplomats with hollow speeches. We were the broken, the bitter, the ones who'd seen too much to want to live and lost too much to die without a reason. I led them. The pilot was a blind ex-engineer named Keen who claimed he could feel space better than any computer. The weapons tech was Varro, a man who once rigged a tank to explode using only a spoon and 2 car batteries. Then there was Tessa, a sniper-turned-saboteur, who never smiled unless something was burning. And Rook, the last hacker from the Crucible mission. He barely spoke now, just sat with his portable terminal and stared at nothing, fingers twitching like he was still inside the code. The launch was unceremonious, no countdown, no media, no last words. We just left, through the silence, into the dark. Ur wasn't marked on any map, but the coordinates embedded in the Crucible's dying signal burned into our system, like a scar. The journey took 17 days, most of it spent in cold dread. We didn't talk. There was nothing to say. On the 17th day, the ship screamed. Not an alarm, not the AI, the ship, the walls, the metal, like it was being pulled towards something unnatural. Gravity twisted, lights bent. Rook passed out cold, muttering fragments of dead languages. And then we saw it. Not a planet, a construct, a world-shaped machine wrapped in layers of ash and decaying atmosphere, orbiting a dead sun, pulsing with energy too dense to measure. It looked like a planet that had been drained, hollowed out, and wired from the inside. Its surface was covered in towers, like the Crucible, but older, broken, covered in black scars. We didn't land. We crashed. Vengeance lost control near the outer field. Our engines locked, the AI shrieked, and the gravity of Yer pulled us in like prey. We hit hard, fracturing half the hull. Keen died instantly. Varro's arm was crushed. Tessa broke her legs but didn't scream. Rook didn't move, but I did. I crawled from the wreckage, rifle in hand, every bone screaming. The sky was black but shifting, like an ocean of smoke. The towers groaned in the wind. And the ground? It was warm, organic. We walked, no direction, just toward the central spire, a needle piercing the sky, larger than anything I'd ever seen. Along the way, we saw the truth. Bodies, millions of them, human, alien, hybrid, all embedded into the walls, wired into machines, eyes open, mouths silent. Some were still breathing. Others were dreaming, it seemed. Flashes of memory played in the air above them. Wars, pain, laughter. All of it feeding into the spires. This wasn't just a control center. It was a hive of minds. They had built their empire not with invention but with theft. Every species they'd conquered, every world they'd purged was stored here, mind first. They didn't create, they absorbed. And Earth was just another brick in their monument to control. At the base of the spire, we found the core gate, a door made of bone and steel, engraved with runes we couldn't read. Tessa blew it open with her last mine. Inside, the truth waited. Not a god, not a king, a mirror, a human, emaciated, stretched into wires, arms replaced with cables, a face covered by metal plating. But beneath it, eyes. Our eyes, tortured, fractured. He looked at us and said nothing, just lifted a trembling hand and pointed at Rook. Rook stepped forward. He didn't hesitate. He reached into the core, into a panel of light and wires, and screamed. Not from pain, from recognition. "I've been here," he whispered. "Before the war, He collapsed. The creature behind the gate smiled. And then the whole spire began to collapse. We had one shot, one charge, one kill switch, and I hit it. The explosion swallowed us in white. They thought we died on your ore, and in a way we did. No signal came back, no beacons, no escape pods. Just a last energy spike picked up by an old orbital array in Greenland. One final flare of radiation unlike anything Earth had ever recorded. Then silence. Again. Command wrote us off as martyrs, another suicide squad whose names would be buried in digital obituaries no one read. The mission succeeded, they said, except we didn't stay dead. 7 days after that flare, the sky cracked, not with ships, not with fire, with voices, a signal, raw, pulsing, erratic, broadcast in every language known to man. Not a declaration, not a demand, a scream. "We remember." That was the first line. Then came the flood. Memories, dreams, data, lives. Centuries' worth of thought poured into our networks like blood through open veins. Entire consciousnesses, not human, not alien, but something in between. A psychic shockwave that tore through satellites, servers, even the minds of those sensitive enough to hear the static behind the message. Something had been broken on Yer. Something deep. And it hadn't just killed the source, it freed it. Rook hadn't died in that spire. He'd become something else, a seed, a virus of awareness, the echo of billions who had been wired into the Empire's hive, now unshackled and burning across the stars. They didn't die in silence. They screamed back. The signal spread to the Empire's fleet, their outposts, their colonies, every corner of their dominion, and with it came collapse. Ships stopped answering commands, drones began wandering aimlessly, shadows turned on their creators, ripping through control stations, slaughtering officers who tried to reassert control. Entire star systems went dark. Not because we bombed them, because the ghosts we freed refused to stay buried. Earth's skies cleared. For the first time in years, no alien craft loomed above, no weapons hummed, no kill drones watched from the stratosphere. And yet, we didn't celebrate. Because the message hadn't stopped. We remember. Again and again, across every broadcast, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in screams, always the same 3 words. Some believed it was a victory chant. Others thought it was a warning. Me? I think it was a question, a challenge. Earth rebuilt slowly. Madsen's old resistance cells became governments. Survivors rose as leaders. Borders blurred. Nations fell. The world began to unify, not out of peace but exhaustion. They built statues, memorials, named a mountain after Rook, even though no one found his body. But me, I stayed away. I live alone now, somewhere in the Siberian wastes. What's left of them? Cold, silent, free. I monitor the skies every day, and every night I dream of that moment in the spire, of the creature pointing, of Rook's scream, of the explosion, of the signal, of the eyes that looked like mine, because the final message wasn't sent just to the stars. It was sent to us, to the next generation, the survivors. We remember, not just the war, the loss, the fight, but the cost of forgetting who we are. They built their empire out of stolen memory, out of erased identity, out of pain that was never mourned. That's how they controlled, and that's how we won. By remembering. Every scar, every scream, every betrayal. We are the nightmare now, and if anything ever comes again, they won't find victims. They'll find monsters who survived monsters.